And so they didn't really know what to tell us. They had to bring in a specialist that had ever seen a case like this. One of the hardest parts of going out in public with Hadley since birth is the looks and the stares and the questions like, did you strangle your baby? Did you leave her, not cover her with sunblock? We found out with the port wine stains that is enlarged capillaries below the surface. We believe that she was absolutely beautiful and perfect and just like God wanted her. But they told us that we would have to start undergoing surgeries through all of our trials, that it helps somebody else that might be going through a similar situation, is to be able to help special needs parents or families and us meeting each other where we are to help out and not to judge, and just to say, I'm here to help.
Hey there, welcome to the Mental Perk Podcast. I'm Carla Hutcherson, licensed professional counselor.
And I'm Brandy Mock, entrepreneur, author, and community leader. And we're here to talk about
real people, real issues, and real talk.
Welcome back to Mental Perk. Today we have an incredible guest, Heather Graham, an elementary school counselor with over 21 years of experience and a newly licensed professional counselor. Heather's journey took a profound turn when her fourth child was born with a very rare disease, leading her to become not only a powerful advocate, but one of the sources of hope that others facing life's toughest challenges. Her story is one of resilience, faith, finding purpose through adversity. Heather, we are so excited to have you on our show.
Welcome, Heather. We're so glad to have you.
I'm so excited to be here and honored.
Excited.
So can you tell us about what this rare disease is?
Yeah, so my daughter Hadley, who is almost 4, she was born at birth with over 50% of her body purple. And so at birth, we thought that she was actually not alive. And so it was a cesarean birth, so I could not see anything. But my husband was like, is she alive? Like, what's going on? And so then I was freaking out. But I have wonderful doctors that know me very well. And they were like, Heather, you got to focus on us because you're going to have a crooked scar if you don't focus on us. And I was like, okay. And so,
You're like, not the scar.
Yes. You know? And so they didn't really know what to tell us because they had never seen a case like it. And so they just said, she's fine, she's breathing, we'll figure out what's going on, we'll cross that road when we get there. And so it wasn't until the 4th day that they had to bring in a specialist that had ever seen a case like this. And so she told us that it was port wine stains, so they're just pretty much like birthmarks that are over her entire body, and that because one of the birthmarks covered part of her eye, that it could be an indicator of 4 different things. And one of those things, I always ask for worst case scenarios, and she said the worst case scenario would be Sturge-Weber syndrome. So it's a neurological disorder that has involvement in the brain. And so I was like, okay, well, how is she now? So they did an MRI, and there was no involvement at that point in time. But they did tell us that if it was going to come, that it would present itself within probably the first year of life. Oh. And so when we had to start going to all the specialists to have all these tests done. And we found out with the port wine stains that is enlarged capillaries below the surface. And so they're grouped together and they merge together. And so we believe that she was absolutely beautiful and perfect and just like God wanted her. But they told us that we would have to start undergoing surgeries every 2 to 3 months for laser surgeries when she turned 1. And if we didn't, then what happens over time are these birthmarks, they enlarge, and so it won't be smooth skin. Like they darken, they raise, they harden, and then they get like what they call blurbs. And so it can be turned into skin cancer and all that. So it presents other health risks as well as you look different than what you were at birth. And so we began those surgeries at 1. So she's been undergoing those. And then at 4 months, she had her first breakthrough seizure to where she was 45 minutes in the seizure.
Oh,
and
you're kidding me.
Yeah, and
so
we
hard.
We really didn't know it was happening. We believe now that it had been happening all throughout the day because she was sleeping all day.
Right.
And we think that she was having seizures, like small
absent seizures. You couldn't see them
all throughout the day
right.
because she had her eyes closed. And my in-laws were in town, thankfully. God always has things happen at the right time.
Yes.
But they were at our house, and we got home that night, and we took her out of the car seat, and she completely locked up on her right side. And I was like, Jeremy, I think she's having a seizure. And he was like, how do you know? And I'm like, I think she is. Like, we got to go. And so our in-laws stayed at home with the rest of the kids, got in the car, went to the first emergency room. It was closed. And so we had to drive.
An emergency room
know,
that's
right?
closed, right? So
And so then we went to the other one, and at that point, they didn't really know. They were giving her medicine to get her out of the seizure, but I was like, we have to call Children's. Like, we're already under their umbrella. And so I called and got them on the phone, and they were like, no, we're transporting her right now. And so we ended up going into Children's, and for the next 12 days, she was hooked up to monitors, and they couldn't get the seizures under control. And so they got them regulated. She was having 12 to 14 seizures an hour in the hospital.
Her little body had to have been exhausted.
She was exhausted. And so all the specialists came in. They officially diagnosed her with Sturge-Weber syndrome. And so then that got my husband researching. So we found the leading Sturge-Weber specialist in the U.S., and he had already gotten in contact with her. But the cool thing was, while we were in the hospital, she was at a seminar, and the neurologist from Children's was also at the seminar and was talking to our neurologist over the phone. I know, it was
such a God
amazing.
thing.
It is a God thing. And so they were already discussing Hadley and asking questions to her while we were on the phone with her office trying to set up an online meeting with her. And so it was just a full circle event. So our neurologists have been amazing at Children's. They consult with her all the time. We got to officially meet her last October in person. And
now, where is she located at?
So she is at the Kennedy Krieger Institute.
Okay.
And so she's the one that actually found the gene mutation that's different within Sturge-Weber.
And what is this doctor's name?
Ann Comey.
Ann Comey, shout out to you for
shout
all your
out.
research.
Wow, you're doing amazing
Saving
work.
lives by
Yes,
Danielle,
you
your
are.
research, so
Yes,
thankful.
she is
Thank you.
amazing. And so she's just been a part of our lives from the beginning. And so Hadley was diagnosed. And on the side of those symptoms, so she has pressurized in her eyes, so she has glaucoma. And so we do there's different treatments for it, but right now it's just eye drops. And then we're actually in the process of waiting to get genetic testing done because Dr. Comey believes that there's something else going on, because usually with Sturge-Weber patients, they only have the port wine stain on their face or over their eye. Well, because hers is covering her entire body, she believes that there's something else going on, and it's a dual syndrome. And so we're waiting for that.
So is it possible, and I know you probably don't know, is it possible to have that, can it mutate, or can it, I'm probably asking very obviously non-medical terms because
That's okay. I'm very layman's terms, especially when I talk to the specialist.
So they're thinking something, because, when I first saw her, before I even knew what it was, I thought about AV malformation, right? It's just the blood vessels and...
Yeah, so a lot of people have port wine stains, and they don't have any brain involvement.
Right.
They can have it and live a completely normal life. There's Sturge-Weber patients that never have a seizure.
Yeah.
So it's such a broad spectrum. It's almost like autism spectrum because everybody's at a different place. They can be confined to a wheelchair, nonverbal, to completely live a typical life and not have any intellectual disabilities or anything like that.
Now, I've seen little Hadley, and we'll put some pictures up when we get ready to air this. She's precious.
Thank you.
But she seems like she's just, how many teaching moments does she teach you, Mama?
Oh, all the time. I have grown
her resilience and
so
strength,
much as an individual, and she teaches our entire family just resilience and just the ability to have all of this adversity in your life and still just conquer it and still bring joy to those around you. Yeah. And she just, to know her is to know Jesus. It's
that
just
is so beautiful.
amazing.
And it is just amazing. And people think that I don't know how I would get through this,
Yeah.
but you find your way. And you have to live it in the moment. You know, you can't think about what the future holds or what the worst thing could happen. You have to be in those moments, because without being in the moment, you forget about those things, all the strength that comes out of it, all the good things that come out of it, all the lessons that come out of it. And so it's so important to do that. And I know that's something that you are learning as you go.
Yeah, and it's really hard, I know, as a human, to be able, when you're going through this traumatic experience, to be able to face it, because you're it's not selfish thinking, but you're thinking, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to get through this? Why is this happening to me? Like, why does my child have to go through this? And I remember whenever the doctors were sitting with us, and they told my husband and I, like, we're officially diagnosing her with Sturge-Weber. And I just looked at him and I said, okay, I need to know what the worst case scenario is and what the best case scenario is. And then I need you to get on all your research done and tell me what are the things that you can learn from her, because I do not want her to go through this experience without a purpose.
Yeah.
And I was like, if it's not ministering to other people, and if it's not
Saving a
educating
life.
y'all to build your program here, then it's not worth it.
Okay,
And
well, we got the title of the show, Mama on a Mission. I'm telling you, because
And so they have, like, that's been our mission the entire time, is that through all of our trials, that it helps somebody else that might be going through a similar situation. And it's almost kind of, I guess, chosen my field of line for my counseling, for my private practice, is to be able to help special needs parents or families.
I was about to say that medical, specializing, really finding a niche within your counseling practice is, this medical trauma. It is huge. And so many families are experiencing things. If you think about all the children's hospitals in the nation, and there's not enough medical trauma counseling.
Yes, I would love to eventually, like my retirement gig, just to be able, and even now, just I try to, like, I have small groups for special needs parents that I lead, and within the church and stuff like that, and just finding every opportunity, because it is such a lonely place to be, and you feel like you're drowning all the time, and it's almost like you're afraid to talk about it, because when you talk about it, you're wanting people to see this social media view of your life, and then you don't want to go tell them, man, today I struggle to get out of bed. Like, I can't even, like, I'm just glad to be here at work and drop her off at school. And half the time I take her in her stroller to the classroom. She has no socks and shoes on because she refuses to put them on.
You know what? She's earned that.
Yes, she doesn't put her jacket on. And I'm just, like, rolling her in, and I'm just looking at her teachers going,
you can have
here
her.
you go. Good luck. And so they just laugh at me because they know me. But, how many times do people, like, try to hide all the struggles that they have because they don't feel like people understand, or that they're judging them?
Well, I think social media when it first started, it was a way of people played this role where they were so perfect. I think that social media has such a bigger purpose of showing the trials in life and how we overcome them. And I'm hoping it changes into that, because people go through some really big things that nobody know about.
And that's what I've tried to make all of my platforms. I get accused of sometimes of being too authentic, just because I want people to know that I can live this great life. I can be thriving. I can be successful, but I have trials every day, and I have to breathe every day. I have to use those counseling strategies that I have to be able to keep the anxiety down, to be able to just face and enjoy the moment and enjoy different things, and not to miss out on those things, because if I didn't, I would be depressed all the time. And I do get to places of depression.
Sure.
But I can recognize it.
So.
And I can talk about it.
Yeah.
And I don't feel less of a person.
Nope, you shouldn't.
Because I'm going through those times.
Yeah. And, you think what you just said, and I get that, a lot of people just want you to see the surface end of all the, I call it the rainbows and lollipops, right, of life. But I know you may not realize it now, but I'm just a person on the outside. I know you, but from a person on the outside, seeing the real things that are going on in life are going to help other people walk their journey through what they're going through. Because you never know, there may be one certain thing you say about Hadley's journey, that a parent that had a child that was not diagnosed properly may go, oh my gosh, like this sounds just like my child, which
Yeah.
you could do that all day long, I guess, right?
Yes.
And it could go down a rabbit hole. But the fact that you're being real and transparent, don't ever stop doing that, because
Yeah, I think it's the best
people
thing.
need to hear that. They need to see it. You're going to always have those naysayers, but being the authentic you are, and I've seen you, and it's I've been in tears watching some of the stuff you posted because it pulls on your heartstrings. Children, that's the last thing you want to see, a child suffer and go through things. But when you get to see the realness of mom going through her journey and Hadley going through her journey, and not just Hadley and mom, you got dad and you got the siblings, right?
Yes.
So how have the siblings processed sister?
Yeah, so they've all done it differently. So growing up, I have two wonderful bonus kids that I got. I always say they were the best part of the marriage package deal.
Sorry, husband.
Yes, he knows.
Yeah.
And so I've always raised them, especially when we had Jarrett together, that they could participate in their own way. And because I'm like, I'm not having a child and expecting y'all to become babysitters.
Yeah.
Like, y'all are kids and y'all will be kids. And so they have their own personalities, so they're at a different place. And then Jarrett is actually the reason why Hadley is here, because when he was 5, my husband was done having kids, and so I had grieved because I wanted 8 kids. And then
You wanted 8 children?
I wanted 8 kids, yes. I'm from a big family, so I was like, I want a big family. And so I had grieved, accepted, and moved on, sold all of Jarrett's baby stuff. And Jarrett came at 5 years old and said, Mom, I want a baby sister. And I said, well, unfortunately, we're done having kids. So you're either going to have to go talk your dad into it, which is not going to happen, or you're going to have to start praying that God provide a miracle. So he literally prayed every night at bedtime for a baby sister.
Goodness.
And about 7 months later, I got pregnant, and we were not trying. We were preventing it, and
well, you weren't preventing good enough, Heather. And look at the bundle it brought you.
And, God provided his little gift. So he claims Hadley as his gift from God. So he takes ownership over her. And so his walk with Hadley has been different from my older kids, just because he felt like Hadley was his.
He was wanting her.
And he's at a different age.
Yeah.
He's a lot younger. So he couldn't understand the things that she was going through. And so it's been amazing to watch him just be able to process the diagnosis. It was hard on him because we were in the hospital for 12 days.
Yeah.
Children's has a wonderful advocacy program that they came in, and because it was right after COVID, and they were not allowing guests in, and so their advocacy center got special permission for the kids to come up and spend a day with us, and for me to leave the hospital to go eat lunch with them while Jeremy stayed at the hospital. And so they did an amazing job explaining to Jarrett, this is what's going on with Hadley's brain. And we kind of explain it like her brain has a party without inviting her. And then
That's a great way of explaining it.
And and that's what the seizures are.
Wow.
And then she's so exhausted from all the partying that she has to sleep afterwards. And so when we brought her home, it was probably 2 months after she'd been diagnosed. He had her upstairs, and she couldn't crawl or anything. She was just laying there in her play mat, and he was laying down beside her playing, and he came running to me, and he's like, Mom, I think Hadley's having one of those, and he didn't know the word seizure, and I cannot even remember what he said, but he was like, one of those episodes or something like that, and I was like, what? And I went up, and she was in the middle of a breakthrough seizure, and he saw it and noticed it.
You noticed the signs.
Yes, and so I told him to get the iPad and start recording her, because at that point we're supposed to be recording every time she had a seizure. And so he's sitting there. I have the sweet little video that's on my Facebook, and he's sitting there, and I'm on the phone with the 911, and I'm explaining what's going on, and we're trying to decide whether or not to call the ambulance and give her emergency med. And he's like, Hadley, you're doing great. You're doing awesome.
You need to send us
goodness.
that video.
I love that. We
the
put it up
Can
on
you
our-
share that on our?
Yes,
Okay.
most definitely. And so, and I'm just I'm like, and the 911 operator's like, oh, I love brother. So he's just the absolute best. But and then my oldest son, he's out of the house and married now. He's serving in the military.
Well, thank him for
Thank you
service.
for his
yes, I'm
service.
so proud of
Definitely.
him. And he's the cutest little thing. Like he waits until nobody's looking and he'll walk around with her and he's like, oh, Hadley girl. And I'm just like, you are a sweet boy. And then my daughter, she's just amazing. Like she just is nurturing and just anytime that we need help, like she just takes Hadley in her room and watches her because it takes a village.
It does. No, it does.
I
Like a
was
Because she
gonna
has to be
ask you about
monitored all
that.
the time.
I was going to
so.
say, how do you go
What
ahead
is
and
your
ask?
what does your support community look like for all of
Yeah,
this?
so it's God first. Like God has really placed the correct people in my life and just been amazing at being able to build our community and our network. And that would be my biggest thing. Like, first of all, you need to find your faith, if you have faith, to be able to get you through something like this. And then second of all, you have
necessary.
to build your village. Like it takes a village. And so I have a wonderful family support system that my mom is a retired nurse. And so it's
perfect.
convenient. Yes.
Yeah.
See how God works. And then my sister actually at our church, we have a special needs program. And it started about a year and a half before Hadley was born. And they asked my sister to pastor it. And so God was already preparing her
Wow,
as
he
well. So
was.
she had already been through a lot of classes in preparing her for that. And so the school, I ended up getting the job at the school after Hadley was born. And we have the most amazing teachers at our school that I absolutely love. And they just, feed into her life on a daily basis. And just to see the growth that she's had since starting public education. I am an advocate for public education.
There are some great services in
Yes,
public education, 100%.
She wouldn't get all the
No,
therapies
she
and all
wouldn't.
that
You're right.
without public education. So I'm like a complete believer in it. And just to see the growth of being nonverbal and starting school for just 3 hours a day in August to now speaking forward sentences, knowing complete songs, being able to communicate and tell us what she wants, and just being able to, sit in a chair.
Yeah.
That was like, I'm like, oh, now if you can potty train her, then we'll be great. But, it's just
Calm down, Mom. It's coming.
One thing
It's
at
just,
a time.
It's just amazing to see our entire village and just the friends, like all the small group that I lead, just being able to grow with the knowledge that they have, that they walk this road. And all of our stories are different. All of our kids have different situations, but we all go through those same emotional struggles, the same inadequate feelings all the time, and just not knowing what to do and to be able to help each other with the paperwork of all the health stuff.
That leads me to wonder, what have you gone through in your journey? Because there's so many different journeys of grief and trauma, and you go through all these, like, first you're bargaining, and you're just anything you can do to just bargain for the health of that child. But a lot of times it turns into anger, and then it
Yes.
turns into all these other things. So what's your journey been like?
So it started at the very beginning. When I found out I was pregnant, I went and told my husband, and at that point he was done having kids. So he was completely shocked, and he had just received the news of his grandfather passing away that had been such a great mentor to him. And so he's like, I know we need to talk about this, but I can't talk about it right now. And so it was literally 2 weeks of him not talking about being pregnant and bringing this new life. And so I found out on a Monday that I was pregnant at home. And so I had a doctor's appointment on Friday, and I went in, and at that point they told me that she wouldn't make it through the weekend, that don't get attached, just prepare yourself. Like when you come in on Monday, we don't believe that she'll have a heartbeat. And they didn't say she at that point.
What
but-
was going on that they made that judgment?
So my body wasn't producing progesterone.
Okay.
So it was already a high-risk pregnancy because I was older, and Jarrett's pregnancy had been fine, but I was also at risk because of my age at that point in time. And so I was going in every week to have an ultrasound to see if she was
Wow.
still alive. But then when we went in on the Monday for the first official sonogram. They said there's still heartbeat, and my husband and I are rejoicing. And the nurse was like, well, I'll be right back. And I was like, okay. And so then my doctor came in, and he's like, Heather, the baby's fine, but we found a spot on your ovary, and it's pretty large, and so we're going to have to remove it
while you're pregnant.
While you're pregnant. And he's like, I'm not going to do it right now just because we don't expect the baby to live. So we're going to wait it out. We'll wait till December and then see where you are at that point. But you're going to have this removed immediately. And so I went from traumatized that my baby's not going to live.
Traumatized again.
Yes, to this other trauma that I may not live. Who knows? And so it was the defining moment in my life where I was like, I can't live in this turmoil of not knowing. Mm-hmm. And I know it's out of my control. I'm a control freak by nature.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Me too.
So I just really had to put it in God's hands. So at that point, I realized that our brains lie to us every single day. Mm-hmm. And but because of my faith, I know it's the enemy lying to me on a daily basis. And if you want the scientific term, it's perception and assumptions. So when we see people laughing and they're looking in our direction, our brain automatically lies to us and tells us, oh, they're laughing at us. Mm-hmm. But we can't live with that lie. So I'm like, I'm going to have to learn my truths. And whenever my brain tries to lie to me, then I'm going to have to tell myself my truths. And at that point in time, I came up with my philosophy of my truths. And then I couldn't worry about what I didn't know. Mm-hmm. I wanted to know worst case scenario, but I'm like, I'm not going to worry about anything that there's nothing until there's something to worry about.
Right.
And so
Which is such a life lesson in and of itself.
Yes.
But I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm just thinking, just not even knowing anything is wrong, but you knew something was wrong with you, and you knew something was wrong with the baby.
Yes.
How to process all of that stress. I mean, it has got to be a dark moment of just wanting to shut down. I mean, I know faith plays a huge role in that, but even the questions of, okay, God, why are we doing this?
Yes.
What is your plan for me on this?
Well, and that just the timing of having a child at that point in my life, it wasn't what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Because I just started I literally started a job when I found out I was pregnant, and within a week. And then, so I had to go and tell my boss, I'm so sorry that you just hired me with this new career, but I'm pregnant, by the way. But I don't know if she's going to live. And by the way, I have a tumor.
Yeah.
And so I had an amazing boss and friend that just said, well, you wanted a baby, Heather. You're getting what you wanted. I know you wanted a lot of kids.
What a great response.
She was amazing during the whole entire process. Shout out to Miss Crossland. But
yes, Miss Crossland.
Way to go.
We love you.
Yeah. She was and she wasn't able to talk about what was going on either because we didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I just started praying every day, and that's just, my husband was praying. And he came to me, and he was like, finally, after 2 weeks, and he was just like, I know that if you're pregnant, then it is by God. And so you would have never known about your tumor had you not.
I mean,
but that is a great way of looking at it.
Yes, and I didn't ever go to the doctor. So I never took care of myself, physically, and going to doctors and stuff. And so he was like, I know that God was trying to save you. And so we always say that Hadley was my saving grace. And so her name actually means field of heather. And so that's how we came up with her.
Beautiful.
And then her middle name is named after my mom's maiden name, family name, and then my husband's middle name. So, so beautiful. She is just...
But it really kind of starts with your son praying.
Yes, it does.
It starts with him.
It all starts with him.
Well, I think people understand the power of prayer.
Yes.
And I think what happens is people get really impatient when the prayers aren't answered immediately, that you forget to see all the signs of those
not your
prayers
timing,
being
it's
answered.
God's timing.
And the healing of how your miracle comes.
Yes.
So our family has always been firm believers that God is in miraculous healing powers, and that he still does it today. My oldest sister at the age of 4 was healed from leukemia. She was actually on her deathbed, and woke up one morning and sitting on the side of her little crib in the hospital, and she was singing a song my mom had never taught her or anything. And she said, Jesus came into my room last night and healed me, and I'm all better, and has never had a sign of leukemia since. And then my brother, in a football accident, was paralyzed for 6 hours. We started praying, and he miraculously regained feeling and everything after. So our family believes in God's powers and the way God can heal us. And so whenever God didn't heal Hadley the way I wanted him to, and he didn't heal me the way I wanted him to, I had to really make sure that I understood it just may not be in the way that I want, but that healing is coming. And he's using people to heal us. So he used my doctor to come in and have the surgery, remove the tumor before it was too late, and then remove that side of reproductive, and like, I'm better now.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then Hadley, if she had been healed from the very beginning and all this went away and we were great, look at all the people that we would not have had the opportunity to meet through this journey and to be able to speak life into and just be able to connect with. And it's building her platform as she gets older, wherever she goes and what she does, to be able to minister to others.
I'm going to pause this.
Yeah, I wanted to go do the light. Okay, there it goes. It's just...
I had to move my leg a little. Sorry,
I was
sorry,
about to
Anna.
do the same thing.
Our editor, she'll know.
She'll cut it out.
So you go back and you talk about Hadley and preparing her for her journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can see her being this little educator powerhouse. She's got people, you've got to see her personality.
She's a firecracker.
She is the funniest, the sweetest, the cutest little thing. And here's the crazy thing about children we don't understand, or we sometimes don't acknowledge like we should. Their resilience is way on fire. We learn so much for these little kids with their strength and their joy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she doesn't. Does she even know she's having a bad day
What's
sometimes?
interesting is they never play the victim.
They don't.
They
You
don't.
know?
You know, she was actually 2 weeks ago diagnosed with level 2 autism. So that is a part that could be from over 50% of the syndrome that she has. And so we knew it going in. Educationally, she had already been diagnosed, and she has all of the, I guess, the side effects, you would say, to where the mental breakdowns, social, emotional issues, and just being able to connect on an emotional level. But the amazing thing is that she can connect emotionally. And the psychologist was just blown away because she was able to connect with her and then freak out when we were walking out of the office whenever she saw other individuals outside that she didn't know. And I'm like, she knows how to work the system. And I go, she has 2 different therapists. She had a physical therapist and an occupational therapist. And she knew with one of them, if she was done, then she would just start crying and just be like, oh, and the therapist like, oh, sweet Hadley, let's go ahead and play a game. And then with her occupational therapist, she was more like me, to where she was like, oh no, we're not doing this. And so she would just look at her and then smile, and then she would give her a hug, and then she would do one good task of what she wanted her to do, and then she'd be like, oh, good job, Hadley, we're all done. Yeah. So I was like, she knows how to get what she wants. And then she knows how to work her daddy over, most definitely.
Of course she does. Yeah.
But she's just very schedule oriented. We have to have the same schedule every day.
You know, I have to go through because, I thought about this just having you on the show, because I've seen, God love you, how much your schedule has to change.
Mm-hmm. It does.
With
and
taking
I hate
care.
change.
I know.
I hate change.
The control.
Yes.
And so God's kind of taught you a little lesson in this, right?
He's humbled me,
Yeah.
most definitely. That has been the hardest thing, is change. And for me to be able to accept it, and even at home, I want to know if there's a change in my schedule.
Yeah.
And this last week, it's funny that you bring it up, because she had a surgery that was scheduled on the 28th, a neurology appointment scheduled for the 21st during spring break. And then I had Jarrett's 1-year checkup at the pediatrician, and then she had pre-op later in the afternoon on that day. And then I had dental appointments for both of them scheduled on another day. And they had changed her surgery. and moved it up to the 21st, which I had a neurology that day. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like I can't change any of this, but I couldn't cancel the surgery. I'm like, I have to take what they give me. And so I was calling while I'm on lunch break, calling all these different doctors trying to say, could you move me up 1 hour here? And so can you make this work? And so they're amazing. And they're so patient with me because I guess everybody knows my heart, I guess, because I just go in and I'm just like, this is what I have. Meet me where I'm at and help me.
You know what, though?
But that's what they're trained to do.
Yeah,
That's
they
what
are trained to do that.
that.
But just the fact that you're that parent that's going, I need your help.
I need your help.
Instead of like, what do they call it whenever you're trying to diaggnose? You know when you
I'm
Google
not sure.
something, I'm not sure. When you
WebMD?
Yeah, WebMD. Your thank you,
You're like
Carla.
self-diagnosing.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, you know how many parents
like
come in,
WebMD.
they're telling the doctors this is da-da-da-da-da, and the doctor's like, no, you're
Well,
off base.
when you have a child who's faced with such medical complications, it is so important to be a tree. And the reason you got to be a tree is you got to be able to bend and sway.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to be able to go with the wind because you never know what's going to happen. You never know, what's going to come your way that day when you wake up because it's just there's no way to predict it. And so I know that you have learned to just bend and sway a lot.
That is. You're just able to go with the flow. And I think that's it, is that using my breathing tools to when I just feel like I'm overwhelmed and everything's hitting me at one time, especially when I'm at work, I have to learn to departmentalize everything. And I teach my students at school all the time that when you look at all these individual things and you lump them together, it is too much for any human being to go through.
Yeah.
There is no human way possible to make it through it without God. And whenever we start looking at things individually, some of those things are not so bad.
Like that's why we train our patients or our clients to break things up.
Yes, because of that emotional baggage that we're carrying from something that we haven't dealt with yet. We're projecting it with this situation where somebody just was mean to me, like they called me a name or whatever. Okay, well, that's not that big of a deal. But then when I'm carrying it and I've just been told that from a doctor that I'm not doing enough for my child and that I need to do this, this, and this. And then I'm like, oh, no, they called me a name. Oh, my whole life is falling apart. And so I've really learned to take each individual thing, separate it, and then I can take vacations from things. Like I tell my kids, you are allowed to take a vacation from an emotional situation that you can't face yet. And when you're at school, if you have something going on at home, you are allowed to take a vacation and just focus on learning. And then if something happens at school, you are allowed to take a vacation from it when you get home and you can enjoy life.
Absolutely. It's actually a skill, and it's in DBT.
Yes.
Yes, 100%. But it's where you're pushing it away, but you don't push it away for good.
No.
Right? And that's where people kind of get confused is, I'm going to set it here right now until I'm strong enough to deal with it.
Until I'm ready to face it. And I'm in an environment that's safe. With support system to help me process it.
Well, I'm sitting here hearing you say this, and you're professionally having to apply all this stuff, but the personal, how everything has just kind of morphed together with your counseling and then with your personal life. How what you just told me, I'm thinking about you the whole time. How it's doing. I don't know what is going on with these lives.
I don't know.
It's never happened before.
Fun times. Adversity.
Yeah.
It is. It's going to be like this ray of
Just
light
a
coming
small
up.
thing happening in our world.
I'm really
today,
getting
in our
upset
day.
over this, though.
I mean,
I
it's
should leave
like
it
we
in.
had the rain. That's
I know,
one
right?
separate thing.
I'm like
and
this
then
with
now
my
we have
foot,
the
like,
lights.
light, come on, light. It's never happened. I'm like, what the heck,
We'll start doing our breathing exercises right now for you. But I learned yesterday, actually, that you're supposed to breathe from which I already do, but your diaphragm all the time.
Yeah.
I did not know it was
That's
supposed
like
to be
keeping
all the time.
well, it's like your posture. I'm like,
they
I'm not
said
going to do
if
that
you
all the
breathe
time.
with your
flatter
chest,
stomach.
it's like a show of anxiety. Like if you're breathing with your chest, like it's to show your anxiety.
How do you know
and
if
your
someone's
stress.
breathing from the chest?
Because their chest goes
Oh.
out.
Okay.
And your shoulders raise.
And then diaphragm's kind of like,
your stomach goes out.
It's like a singer.
Yes.
Right? If you're a singer, you're singing from your diaphragm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they say, like,
I'm a chest
that's the
breather.
reason why people chest breathe so much is because
a
our
lot of work.
society tells you suck it in, make yourself look smaller, and whenever you breathe from your diaphragm, it makes you look like you're bloated or pregnant. Yeah. So
I was thinking it was going to flatten our stomachs. That's what I was thinking.
no, because you're breathing out in your diaphragm, it makes it go out.
Yeah, it kind of, yeah.
All right.
Well,
Not attractive,
chest breathing it is.
but it's
Chest
healthy.
I know
So-
we got a little off ago.
Yeah, we did get a little off a second because we were talking kind of about those stages where you first you're just kind of bargaining, what can I do to make my child better? And then we go through maybe guilt, and then we go through anger.
Yeah, so I went through a guilt stage all throughout. Still, even to this day, you go through guilt because as a parent, you feel guilty because you feel like you're not doing enough for your child that needs this medical attention and getting them all the resources that they need. But then you start feeling guilty because your typical children are having to miss out or you're not present for them. Like we have to split up a lot of times and Jeremy go with one set of kids while I'm with Hadley or vice versa. And so it's a lot of compromising and the guilt happens all the time.
Yeah.
And we just have to reassure each other like constantly, like, and I reassure the kids all the time, like, I'm sorry, I can't be there. This is what's going on. And your dad's going to videotape for me. They're going to send it to me. And because the other point is if we take Hadley to some of these events, then it's not enjoyable for anybody.
Yeah.
And because she
Very
just
true.
can't handle a lot of the
And it
environments
takes away from that
that
child.
the sports are. Yes. And so my parents do a great job to where I can go and take her and they watch her so I can go to different events and stuff like that. So we've found a great village to help with that part of it. Anger, I don't know that I was ever truly angry. Just more of a question of why and how. I think that a lot of the experiences I had already gone through in my lifetime, that I was past anger. I'm like, you know, this is happening and it's happening so I can bring the glory of God through it. And so how is that going to happen? And I don't want to live in that victim mentality of woe is me ever, because that's not a happy place to live. And so I just had to find purpose through it. So the anger stage, I don't think I ever faced, just because I knew everything happens for a reason. So it was more of a purpose of why did this happen? How can I use this to go forward? And my husband has been simply amazing. We're two completely different people. And we've, you know, sometimes throughout our marriage, we've questioned, you know, like, how are we together when we're so different? And the other day I remember sitting in the kitchen with him, and we have our different roles with Hadley. And I just told him, I said, if you ever question why we're together, then you look at how we parent Hadley and you know why we're together. And I was like, we complement each other so well. And I was like, whenever I'm a very patient person, especially being a counselor, like I, you know how to calm myself. I know how to deal with the stress. I'm going to start crying because I'm going to get emotional about this, because this just shows the greatness of God. But I can be calm as daylight, like just peaceful, sunny. And my husband gets anxiety very often, and he just gets very apprehensive. His heart just feels like he's caving in when Hadley has seizures, or if there's something going on with her, like he can't handle it sometimes emotionally. And I can be calm during those times. But in the moments when I have just got to my breaking point and I'm exhausted and I need a vacation for just 5 minutes from the situation, he is this calm spirit that comes in, and he knows how to calm Hadley down. And so it's amazing that we balance each other to where whenever I can handle it, he may need that break time, and then vice versa. And so, and we have our roles, like he can bathe her. She does not like me to bathe her. And
Isn't that interesting?
yes. And whenever we go to bed, she wants to snuggle me unless I'm going to bed early, and then she wants to be in his lap in the living room to fall asleep. So it's just interesting to see how we connect with her and how she interacts with us on a daily basis. But it complements each other. So you got to find that right person.
Yeah, no, you do. But
You really do.
so Hadley's 4.
Well, she'll be 4 in June.
She'll be
Almost
4 in
there.
June, almost there. But so I know we talked about what is the future for Hadley? I know we're kind of still in that stage of she may even have a new diagnosis
So we are in the wait list right now to get into genetic testing to see if there's something else going on. But then we learned in the last MRI that she just had in October that she might be a possible candidate for brain surgery. So what that looks like, when she was born, they told us it was not a possibility because her involvement is bilateral. So it covers too much of her brain to be able to remove any part of the brain.
Okay.
And then they say the great thing about brain surgery, I know a lot of people that have had it. I don't know the official term for it, so I apologize for the layman's term. But would they remove that affected part if it's triggered in one area from the source of the seizure? And then if the kid is young enough, they can start using another part of their brain to take over and learn what that brain was in charge of.
The younger they are, the better it is, actually.
So we have to have the surgery before she turns 5 is what they say.
Okay.
But in the last one, they think that it's coming from one spot. So we will be going into the hospital at the beginning of May, so y'all be in prayer.
We will be.
But this was a very hard decision that we had to make as parents as well, that we are going to allow them to start taking her off of her medication and force her into controlled seizures.
Yeah.
So she'll have 4 to 5 controlled seizures, and at that point, they will be able to inject some kind of dye into her system that will shoot up to where the seizure is coming from. So we'll see if she's a brain candidate or brain surgery candidate. And then at that point, we have to go through another processing and being able to decide, is this the best thing for her?
Wow.
And so I've been reaching out to a lot of people that have epilepsy as well as people that have the same condition as her as adults and asked them, if you could have had this surgery, would you have want your parents to make that decision? And I've got mixed reviews.
That's a great question.
That's a very good
way
question.
to do the research on that, because a lot of times we don't think about that. To think, let me see how other people, who are in the situation feel about it.
Yeah, because it could ultimately, she could lose everything that she's learned. Yeah. She could not learn it. There's a lot of risk involved.
Absolutely.
And I wish I could just talk to an adult Hadley in the future and just ask her what she would want ultimately. But I believe that God will give us that answer and give us that peace once we get there.
Because a lot of times as parents, we're going to be like, do whatever you can. Just whatever it is, do it. But the fact that you're thinking that through and trying to think of it from her perspective.
Yeah, well, at 4 months when she was diagnosed, if they told me that, we're going to do brain surgery, I was like, okay, let's do it. Yeah. But then they told me it wasn't even a possibility. And now I've seen how much she's learned and where she is at in her life. So it just makes that decision that much harder.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question, too, on that. Have you asked the doctors whenever they get ready to? I know, my daughter's got epilepsy. And so it affects the front temporal lobe. So her processing, anger, all that stuff, which, you go back hindsight and it kind of makes sense why they had these little outbursts. They couldn't process things a certain way. But my question is, I know that every time you have a seizure, it can be damaging to the brain. So is that kind of a comfort for you going, okay, if they can pinpoint this and that's the trigger of all her seizures, does that kind of make you feel better? Because my question, it could get worse. Her seizures could get worse if she doesn't have the seizure, the surgery, right?
There's 2 sides of that. The first part is, yes, I'm interested in seeing if it is targeted to one area. But I know some of her behaviors that she has is based on the medication that she's on. So you just have to take, you have to look at the big picture and to know, okay, I can handle the behavior if it's preventing her from having seizures that could ultimately harm her. And then the other side of that is through the surgery. If there is involvement in other places, it could trigger a chain reaction to set her seizures off to where medication can't even affect it anymore. And so it's just a risk. And so I do believe that the doctors will make sure that it's, going to be effective and stuff like that, but it's just not knowing. But yes, if there was, when she was 4 months old, yes, absolutely.
You would have jumped at that. Yeah.
Yes. Do use all the knowledge that you'll have, the technology that you have, because I know that God has given you that ability to do it, and I'm going to trust you. Now it's a different.
It's a little different
place in
because you've
life.
seen her in a different place.
Yeah, and she's adult. I mean, she's
Yeah.
becoming more verbal. She's fun. She's got this personality.
But when she does have breakthrough seizures, she does lose her motor skills and her verbal for about a week to 2 weeks.
Wow.
So, yeah, it takes about 2 weeks for her to get all of her words back and her to be able to talk. That's the last thing that comes back. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So scary. I mean, everything you've been through is just,
I know.
it's just, but her demeanor and your perspective and your
The strength
outlook
you're going to
on
give other
life, yeah.
parents and even these
Well,
kiddos.
I hope that
You
for
will.
any parent out there, and you don't even have to have a special needs kid. Like, if you have all typical kids, like, parents go through it. And I think that, my pediatrician said it the best whenever I was coaching and had Jarrett, and I still had him sleeping in the bed with me. And I had all these parents going, oh my goodness, like, you shouldn't be doing that. You should have him in the crib and he should not be co-sleeping. And I felt so guilty as a first-time birth parent. And I was like, well, maybe I am doing it wrong. And he was like, Heather, you do what it takes to survive. And every
Yes.
story is different. You don't get much time with him throughout the day because you're working all these hours. So that is your time to connect with your son.
Absolutely. And I feel like, when we are parents, I feel like so many parents have such an opinion on how things should be done. But I am a true believer in parenting is individual to that child.
It is.
And there is no right or wrong on how you choose to do that when you're thinking of your child and what's in their best interest.
Yeah, and it definitely helps, like, being in the education field, like, when you see these kids come in or you see parents and they're just like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, I know, like, you're having a day.
Yeah,
like,
it's
I have
okay.
them every day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's no judgment here. Like, it's just where you are and us meeting each other where we are to help out and not to judge and just to say, I'm here to help.
Absolutely.
How can I help?
Well, Heather, tell us about what you're doing to really help support other people in this situation. I know you're doing a blog. Is there anything else that we can draw families to so that they can get the knowledge and the
Yes.
wisdom from you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did just start, I'm busy. So I'm trying to keep up with Hadley's blog to get awareness out there of just her condition because, one of the hardest parts of going out in public with Hadley since birth is the looks and the stares and the questions like, did you strangle your baby? Did you leave her, not cover her with sunblock? And they're just ignorant questions because they lack
You've
the
literally
knowledge.
had those questions.
Oh yes.
Wow.
I've
People don't
had
ask those questions.
questions, they're very honest people. And I, at the first I was very mad
Yeah.
and angry and defensive. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, this is going to happen her entire life. And I have got to start preparing myself on how to respond because I want her to be able to respond when she gets older. And I want her to be able to be assertive about it and just be upfront about it because it's okay to be curious. It's okay to say, hey, you look very unique. How were you born that way, or did something happen? And it's the times when people say, what is wrong with you, or what's wrong with your face? And I'm like, what's wrong with your face?
Yeah.
Everybody looks different.
Yeah.
And so just I'm very proactive when I walk in and I see somebody staring, or if I see a little kid asking their parent, what's on her face? And they're like, shh, because I'm like, oh, she has port wine stains. They're like birthmarks. And I'm like, we all have birthmarks. The majority of us do. Do you have a birthmark? And then the kid's like, oh, yeah, I do. Or they'll look at their parent and say, do I have a birthmark? And they're like, oh, yeah, you do. And I'm like, she has a different condition that she was born with. So I was like, she has some different learning styles. And I go, but she loves high fives. Would you like to give her a high five? Because she's not contagious. And so,
that.
and then the kids will connect. And then the parent, it opens them up to say, oh, what have you gone through? And then I'm able to share her story.
Yeah.
So if I were to be angry and have the human reaction that I want, then it would close off that door for me to be able to share the love of God and to show her miracles that God has provided in her life.
So you've learned to really be more on the offense than the defense.
Yes, yes, most definitely. And, defense mechanisms, they come just because of insecurity and just that awkward feeling of people don't know how to respond to something that's different than them. And so I always tell our students at school, I'm like, be like Curious George, just be curious. It's okay to ask questions because you're gaining knowledge. It's whenever you are acting out of awkwardness and you stay in that ignorant level of not having the knowledge that it becomes mean.
Yeah, and it's how you ask the question. You can ask a question without judgment. You can ask a question
definitely.
and still be kind.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it's not the question itself. It's how you're asking it. Is it in judgment? It's just like saying, did you forget to put sunscreen? Something like that. So it's just, be aware of how you're asking questions.
And it's really prominent after she has surgery because she has purple marks. So it looks like she's bruised and she's really swollen. So it looks like she's been through some traumatic experience. And so I have to definitely be proactive whenever people start, because I don't want them to call CPS.
Yes,
so I'm like,
100%.
she just had laser surgery. And it's really cool to find people. I had never knew the amount of people that have port wine stains somewhere on their body until I walk around with Hadley, and I have parents coming to me saying, she just had laser surgery, didn't she? And I'm like, yes, she did. And I'm like, please tell me how you know. And then, so every time we meet somebody, we take a picture with Hadley and them. So then it builds up her network. So when she gets older, she has people to call on, and I've gotten all their phone numbers. So it's been amazing to just meet new people. And whenever I went to my first school as a school counselor, one of the girls that worked there, she was in her 20s, and she had a port wine stain on her face. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, please don't take this the wrong way. But I was like, I just had my daughter, and she has these birthmarks on her just like yours. I'm like, do you have Sturge Weber? And she was like, no, I don't. And she was like, so then she got to tell me all about her story and how she decided she didn't want to go through laser treatments anymore. And I'm going to shout out right now to her. I won't say her name just because I don't know if she's okay with that, but she just had to undergo skin cancer surgery yesterday. So I've been praying for her, but that's just one of the things that can come about the port wine stain when they're not
So it's
treated.
never ending. I mean,
It's not. She'll go through this her entire life. So it can get to a stage where it's maintenance. So she can do it once a year, once every 2 years and stuff like that. But right now, when she's at an age that she doesn't really understand and that she's not involved in stuff, we're really trying to hit it hard with the surgeries to try to get as much of the response to it as possible. So because the more you're out in the sun, she can't be in the sun because that thickens your skin and it's less productive with the surgeries.
Oh, goodness. Well, so people can go to Hadley's post or Hadley's, is that what it's called?
Hadley's Facebook page?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Hadley for Hope.
Hadley for Hope. And so we want to make sure
Or
you go
Hope
there.
for Hadley. I'm sorry, Hope for Hadley.
Hope for
Sorry.
Hadley. And we just want to make
Yes.
sure that people are keeping up with the story and what's going on
Yes,
and
most
all the
definitely.
advances that you
and
guys
sharing
make.
their stories
Yeah,
too.
100%.
So that
And-
encourages us as well.
And it's also good for Hadley to be able to go back and read all of those stories.
Yes.
So wonderful opportunity there. And so we'll also put all those links up on ours
we will put them
too.
up there. And guys, be praying for Hadley and her surgery coming up.
And
Yes.
Mama and Daddy
and Mama
and
and
their
Daddy
family.
and
Yes,
the
most
siblings,
definitely.
because and comment, guys, send us comments if you have questions. We'll make sure we send them on to Heather.
Yes, I would love
Or
that.
reach out
if you're
to
going
us.
through this, and we can pass you on to Heather so y'all can connect.
Yeah, because
Wonderful.
that'll open up the network for people that are just
because
going
one
through
of the
same
biggest
thing.
things too I was going to bring up really quick is that there needs to be a support system as well for the family. So Hadley gets all these therapies, she gets all these resources, but one of the things that I've talked to with parents most recently is counseling for the siblings.
100%.
And being able to how to handle it, and then counseling for the parents as a family unit. And so just making sure that everybody's taken care of health-wise and emotional-wise. So that's one thing that we need to reinforce better as parents.
Well, thank you, Heather, so much for
thank
coming
you
on and
so
sharing
much.
Hadley's story. And she's absolutely beautiful.
She is.
So please check her out. Her little pictures are just precious, and that smile.
We'll share them on the video too.
There's social media. Sometimes I post videos where we're going through hard times.
Yes. Well, that's the real of it.
Yeah.
But
So,
yes.
yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you.
If you or anyone you know is struggling with mental health issues, please reach out to talk to someone you trust. Get connected to a mental health professional who can help you find ways to cope and ultimately feel better. If you are having suicidal or self-harm thoughts or thoughts of hurting another person, please go to the nearest ER, call 911, or contact the National Suicide Hotline at 988. Thank you for tuning in to Mental Perk. We hope our talk today highlighted real people working through real issues based on mental health. Our goal at Mental Perk is to make sure every one of you knows you're worthy. We're in this together.